Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. We are so glad you've joined us. I'm here with Alexandra. Hi, Alexandra.
Hi, Dotsie. What do you have for us today? It's the end of the year.
I know. And for those out there that do listen to this podcast on a regular basis, they know that Switch for Good is a nonprofit. And this time of year, well, it's really important for us to raise funds we need to continue our activism and this podcast into 2022. I recently, as in like just a couple of days ago, was so humbled by the generosity of our listeners and our guests, because guess what? We have a matching grant of $10,000 from Miyoko's Cheese. And if you guys haven't heard Miyoko on our podcast, she's episode 65 and it's fabulous. So check that out. We also have another 10K from an anonymous listener of our podcast. So now we have to get to work to raise 20K in the next 2.5 weeks so that these matches can be made, right? Because they're only going to match if we raise the other part, the other 20K. So just to give you guys a little bit of a window into what amounts could help and what it would go to, just $25 will help fund a multitude of education programs that we have, from educating pediatricians to even just someone who visits our website and wants to figure out how to ditch dairy and to make the connection between their food and their health. Just $50 will put a spotlight on the negative impact dairy has on communities of color and help fight corporate greed, like we just did with the Starbucks campaign, if y'all saw that. $100 will fund direct advocacy to demand policymakers put the health of our children over corporate interest. So those are just some examples. So if you feel compelled, and if you listen to this podcast on a regular basis and enjoy it, and most importantly, if you are able to donate, we would be so very grateful. You just go to switchforgood.org and click the donate button. It's really easy. But Alexandra, let's get to the guests because I am so pumped to have these two on. Yes, it's a duo today. So there's going to be 4 of us and lots of chit chat and fun.
Yes, today we have 2 fabulous guests on the show, Michael and Bianca Alexander. The couple co-hosts the long-standing docuseries Conscious Living, which is now available to stream on Amazon Prime and PBS. Each are certified plant-based nutritionists and avid yoga practitioners. And together they document their worldwide travels to hunt down the best vegan food, sustainable fashions, and spiritual enlightenment. But that's just their side hustle. Michael is an experienced vegan chef and holistic entrepreneur, and Bianca is an entertainment lawyer and the lead attorney for The Kelly Clarkson Show. So they prove that you can namaste and hold down a full-time job, right, Dotsie?
Yeah, that's incredible.
There's so much to learn from this power couple. So let's get started. Welcome to the show, Michael and Bianca.
Hello, thanks for having us.
It's good to be here.
We're so happy to have you. 2 are no slouches. I mean, Bianca, you graduated from Princeton and you became a lawyer. Michael, you were Phi Beta Kappa and have an economics degree from UC Davis. But here you are, pretty much the last couple that we think would be, involved with yoga and meditation and holistic health.
Especially if you knew us in the past.
So if we could start with Bianca. Your words are that you used to be, and I'm quoting here, a stressed out smoker who often binged on fast food and cocktails to anesthetize myself from what I was actually feeling, anxious, angry, and afraid. That is a far cry from the woman whom we are talking to now. So, can you give us the Cliff Notes version of your transformation into the healthy, vibrant woman that you are today? I'm sure you still have anxiety, anger, and fear, but you undoubtedly deal with it in a different way. And we will learn all about that today.
The moment of awareness, I won't even say spiritual awakening, which a lot of people do, because the fact is it's not one moment. Spirituality and mindfulness and consciousness is an ongoing evolutionary, day by day, one day at a time process. And we're never there. We're always, in the Buddhist tradition of beginner's mind, starting anew. And, for me, it was really, I think a moment when I met Michael, living in LA at the time, working a very stressed out job, eating poorly and just doing whatever I could to try to cope. But not healthy on the inside, not healthy on the outside. And it was really, I think, meeting Michael was an inspiration, him being from San Francisco, a lifelong environmentalist, holistic practitioner, had worked with building his own businesses in the healing arts for many, many years, really sort of introduced me to the possibility of another way of living. And, I started trying acupuncture. I got my first colonic, which was a life-altering experience. I started adopting a more vegetarian diet, started to cut back on smoking, eventually went sober and stopped drinking. And, all the things that I was doing in order to, as you say, anesthetize myself from what I was feeling. The difficult journey is stopping, confronting what's going on, and really having the courage to dive into our own demons, so to speak. The way out is the way through. And I think where I am now is still very much on the journey of being more mindful and trying to, walk my talk. And by no means do we hold ourselves out as gurus of conscious living. In many ways, we're the least conscious people you will ever meet. And that is what keeps us going to try to do more and to try to be better and hopefully inspire others along the way.
Mm-hmm. In talking about your willingness, I like that word, because when you met Michael, obviously you had a willing spirit, or you wouldn't have even dove in. But take us back to what you were actually feeling. What were you anxious about? What were you fearful of? It sounds like you were very successful, and you were numbing out. It sounds like with cocktails and food, fast food.
Yeah.
What was your experience?
Yeah, well, I think, my experience was that, despite all of the accomplishments and, the money and the titles and that sort of thing, those things that we often use as proxies for success, it was just the pressure of not fully living my authentic truth. I had a lot to say. I had a lot to do in the world. And I think there was some inklings that, I'd be doing something more than just practicing law, which is very, honorable profession. I think part of what drew me to the entertainment industry was the fact that I myself am an artist, but grew up, on the East Coast in a very conservative family. And it was like, there are only two definitions of success. It was lawyer, doctor, right? So it's like, okay, let me just squeeze myself into this little box called lawyer and, try to build a happy life from there. But there were, so many other parts of my own self-expression, of my own spiritual journey that I didn't really have access to because I wasn't being authentic to the storyteller, that was sort of hiding underneath, my corporate suit. And I think that is a big piece of what causes anxiety, to what degree anxiety is so huge today is because, we spend so much time looking outside to identify ourselves, to compare ourselves to others. We need more money, we need more sex, we need more stuff, we need more gifts, we need more likes, we need more external validation. And for me, that lifestyle is what created the anxiety, because it was like my soul was hiding underneath all of that. And so I think the smoking, the drinking and the fast fooding and kind of dating Mr. Wrong over and over and over again was just a way to kind of block out my intuition that was telling me there's another path for you that may be a little more challenging than sort of just doing what everybody expects you to do. And so the anxiety was just under the surface. And the more you try to, repress things, the more they express, often in unhealthy ways.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you got sober. Does that mean that you actually felt out of control with alcohol? Were you an alcoholic, or do you feel like, what does sober mean to you today?
Yeah, no, I wasn't an alcoholic. I never felt out of control with alcohol, but I did smoke marijuana, and that is a drug. It's legal. And for many people, that's, a medicine. It was for me at one point in time where it's like where you have to get up and, wake and bake, right? In order to like feel good about the day. Even if you're meditating and doing yoga after, it's kind of like that's a problem. And for me, I felt it became a problem because I was not living in alignment with the teachers of my spiritual path, with my own, sort of principles of confronting what's there as opposed to sort of trying to smooth things over and feel good at all the time, which again, the more that you peel off the layers, you realize that there's unexpressed emotions, there's unexpressed dreams and goals and sort of your own integrity, your soul that is like fighting to kind of like have a say at the table. And, I did those things in order to kind of push those parts of myself down so that I could conform to sort of what I thought society expected of me, of what my parents expected of me, what I thought my culture expected of me. I was relaxing my hair, I'm a natural curly, I was doing so many things to kind of conform to what I thought I needed to be. And I think that that's a big pain body also for, people of color and women of color in this country. We're sort of, assimilated to believe that like who we are fundamentally is somehow wrong and there's something else you need to be. And if you can kind of check the box and get the right career path or get the right, suffix after your name, right, then maybe you're good enough, whereas, what makes you good has nothing to do with what's on the outside. And it took sort of, I would say hitting rock bottom, my rock bottom, which was just, I'm not happy. I'm not feeling fulfilled. I'm not feeling like I'm contributing to the world in a way I wanted to. And now, trained as an attorney and educated at the highest level, but like knew nothing about how to take care of my, my body, knew nothing about, pH, knew nothing about, adopting a more plant-based diet, knew nothing about, the true cost of fashion and the clothes that I wear. It's like, I felt like I knew nothing about life.
Michael, you met her and you helped change her. Tell us about your own change. Were you always eating a healthy plant-based diet? What drew you to this life of holistic health and meditation, spirituality?
Yeah, well, I don't think I changed her. I think, what I recognized was the diamond that she is underneath a certain amount of dirt. Yeah. And she did the same for me because in my 20s, I was, I made fun of vegetarians. I literally called them vegetarians and it was all about eating meat and I'm a hunter and I'm, and I was an arrogant, a-hole for lack of a better term. I really was. And so while sure, I grew up in San Francisco, born and raised and, was an environmentalist and went to John Muir's house at, in third grade and made, learned about John Muir and loved nature and sort of had that aspect of my upbringing and was committed to, the environment and all of these other things. I think, for me, part of the journey forward was falling in love. And love is the most powerful tool and the most powerful force on the planet. And inside of this relationship where you're with somebody that you love, it pulls you forth to want to become better. And it pulls you into this place where now I want to be a better person. And, I didn't want to go vegan. I loved meat, loved it, loved In-N-Out Burger.
So you were not plant-based when you met and
no, not literally. I was, I was against it and made fun of them and thought it was ridiculous.
We took that journey together, going vegetarian.
Well, but it was seeing her and seeing how she, but the fact of the matter is that I was, had a certain amount of experience with holistic health and with detoxing and knew the importance of Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine that talks about detoxing 4 times a year as the seasons change. And so began to introduce these things to her and began to talk to her about her body and, how she was releasing, the regularity with which she was releasing.
Which I wasn't.
Which she wasn't.
I was like blocked and repressed in every way imaginable.
And
Packed in there.
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean, just,
So
we need some vegetables, we need some water, and you need a colonic, honey. You need a series of colonics. And that's what kind of got me moving in more ways than one.
Probably 18 years ago, that was the last time she had meat. or fish of any kind. And, inside of that and inside of her journey forward, then it sort of pulled me forth to say, okay, well, maybe I should consider not eating meat. And so I went vegetarian maybe a year later, and then, was vegetarian for a couple of years and went back to meat for a couple of years. And then for me, it was really a spiritual, sort of challenge, where I was really challenged to say, you say you want to be a force for peace and love in the world, and yet you're ingesting the suffering and the pain of animals. What is that doing to your vibration? And what is that doing to who you say you want to be in the world? And so, 16 years ago is when I finally gave up meat, or 15 years ago. And that was the journey. It was really, I think, a journey of love, and a journey that said, hey, I want to be better. I want the best for her. And inside of me, sort of pulling for her, then I got pulled up, all boats rise in high tide.
Can we stay on the detox bit? Because selfishly, I'm quite curious. I'm going to be honest. I haven't done one because I have a history of 5 years fighting for my life as an anorexic 25 years ago. But I am very curious and interested in a detox from a spiritual perspective. There isn't anything in my physical body that I'm like, oh, wake up like I really got a detox. Feel really fantastic all the time. So it's not from that standpoint. So I guess I want to ask some questions around what is the spiritual experience like? And then maybe for someone who's listening and feels somewhat like me, what might be a baby step for a first, maybe short detox?
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I would just say that having never done a cleanse ever, the first time that Michael was like, oh, hey, we've got these great products that, his company was distributing at the same time that Chinese doctors say, and Ayurvedic, practitioners say, and many, holistic doctors say, of all paths, that cleansing with the seasons, it's like we, change the oil in our car every 3,000 miles, but never do anything to kind of give our bodies support to reset. And I was terrified the first time because all the energy that's trapped. And you think about the spiritual, emotional, issues that we have when we're eating food, what we're feeling when we're eating, which is why it's really important to try to, if you can, eat in silence and eat with people you love and that you care about, and environments that support you, because the energy with which you're eating is going into your system, and that's going into your body and being assimilated and digested, et cetera, et cetera. So, all of those energies and all those emotions that I was stuffing down over my entire lifetime were inside of me and were crying out, no, we don't want to leave. We don't want to leave. We don't want to leave. So I was so scared. But after the first one, it was like a load lifted off of me. And I felt like a higher level of emotional freedom, clarity. My meditations started to get deeper. My thoughts began to change because I was no longer thinking thoughts from age 12 when I used to be addicted to hot dogs, right? It's like, who was I back then? What's in my colon? What is my colon trying to say to me? And many people said that your gut, your heart, and your head, the connection is so much deeper than we think. And so if our guts are clogged, how can our heart chakra be open, and how can our crown chakras be open? Blockages are blockages. So detoxing for us has been very much a spiritual practice, in that it's about peeling off the old layers that no longer serve us and making room, no different than, cleaning out a closet, right? For, new energy, better feng shui, inside as well as out.
And is that a cleanse with water or with juicing, or how does do you have any calories that come in, and for how long, which may not be for me. If you tell me it's 10 days, I need the baby step of how to try it.
Well, I think, for me, how I went from vegetarian to vegan is 11 years ago. I met a woman in Chicago named Karen Calabrese, and she was a restaurateur, and she had many restaurants, and, she was 64 and looked about 40.
She still looks 40. She was on our podcast.
Yeah.
And,
and inside of that, she said, hey, we're going to do a raw detox, and you can eat as much as you want, as often as you want, as long as it's raw. And the first week we went vegan, and, and then we began to go raw, and I ate a lot. I ate a whole lot. And for me, emotionally, I needed that to know that I was going to be okay, because food is a very emotional journey. And And so I ate and I ate and I ate, and I looked up, and yeah, there was a lot of emotions that came up inside of giving up cheese and giving up, the things, the breads, the things that I liked. I was, in many ways sort of, kind of angry. There was a lot of anger that came up because I would suppress my emotions with food. But on the other side of that, I looked up and I had lost, 20 or 30 pounds in a month. And I felt smarter than I'd ever felt, because I felt my mind without cheese. Cheese for me made me dumb. And I felt my body, and I felt liberated from the shackles of needing to eat a certain type of food in order to feel okay. And so it was, it was that journey that we went on. And then we began to, we became plant-based nutritionists. And then from that, we created a 10-day detox book that's available on Amazon, an ebook, where we really worked with people who said, hey, listen, give us 10 days. You can eat as much as you want. You can eat as often as you want. And part of the introduction was introducing not just changing the types of foods that you eat, but also introducing and using traditional Chinese herbal products, traditional Ayurvedic products that naturally detox your body, so that all of the toxins that we're exposed to in the air, all of the toxins we're exposed to in our house, all of the things that we experience in foods and the additives and the preservatives and all of those things, your body can get to release them. And inside of releasing them, at least for me, there's an awakening. There's an awakening to who I really am.
And I think just to acknowledge, what you shared, Dottie, I think, many of us who have struggled with our weight or with eating or eating disorders, a calorie restriction program or something that feels like you're restricting yourself or like stopping yourself or trying to control your eating can be very triggering. Right? Because you're thinking, I don't want to go down that road again. I don't want to go down to, fad dieting and the sort of zero sum, which is something that I think many women and men have battled with. You're not alone in that. And so I think for us, being willing to kind of take the middle road, right? It's like, it's not about starving yourself. It's not about withholding food from yourself. It's like, eat when you're hungry, right? But the types of food you're eating combined with other, modalities, whether it's, Ayurvedic, skin brushing, colonics, lemon water at the top of the day, things that support, the traditional Chinese herbs, colonic, many other modalities we use to help support the body's natural sort of process of releasing. It's not all about the food that goes in your mouth. It's about, releasing toxic people from your life. That's a big piece of what we cover in our detox book. It's like removing yourself from toxic environments, right? Following your dreams and being true to yourself, and, setting aside time to honor your spiritual practice, whatever that is. All those are things that like bring in good energy. And naturally, when you're in that vibration, it's like being in an infrared sauna. The toxins are going to leave, right? So we don't have to, develop eating disorders in order to cleanse, in order to be healthy and go vegan.
That's interesting. I have friends who they say, oh, I'm doing a detox. And then they seem to go back to their old ways after. And so it concerns me that, like, what did they learn from it? I think that's the question that people often don't ask. They just want to erase the things that they did, the destruction that they might have done, and they think it can be done in 10 days. But can it be erased? Isn't it mostly a psychological bridge to who you were and to who you want to be? It can be a good way to jumpstart healthier eating if people have that attitude instead of just, I want to lose weight.
Absolutely. And and that may be, the universe uses many interesting ways to have us take the next step.
Yeah.
So how we got on our spiritual path, for example, was that we got a 20% discount on the venue, a place called Lake Shrine in Pacific Palisades. And, basically they said, hey, if you become a lesson student for Paramahansa Yogananda, who was one of the people that brought a great Indian saint who brought yoga to the West, you can get a 20% discount on the venue. And for us, it was like, okay, we'll do it.
It was a financial decision.
Right. And here we are, 17 years later, and that is our guru and that is our spiritual path. But it took a discount to get us to step in that direction. And we've worked with—
it's so real. I love it.
But our commitment is really like, go back once a quarter, do it again, do it again, do it again. And you will see over time that you begin to shift and change no matter what your motivation is.
That growth is not linear. It doesn't just go, and now I go from like being unhealthy and now I'm super healthy, I'm misconscious. No, it's like you go healthy and then you go down. And
we all think that's what's going to happen, but it doesn't, does it?
It never does. And being compassionate and recognizing that those dip downs are just as much a part of the trajectory upward as, getting it perfect. And I think that's the journey of mindful living. That's the journey of conscious living, is can you still love yourself in the morning after you have that Haagen-Dazs ice cream, right? And then get back on your program. I think our guru says a saint is a sinner that kept getting up, right? That's all that, being mindful is just keep getting up and fighting the good fight for another day. And that, I think, commitment is what actually can move mountains.
How do you guys, would you say that you balance conscious living with people that have such a busy life? It's well, not especially in the Western world, but I would say we seem and act like we're busier than the rest of the world. Because you guys have said that it's definitely not namaste all the time. But sometimes making the conscious decision for some, or maybe they think it's going to induce more stress in terms of effort, time, cost. So how can people assess and make decisions by weighing the benefits of a more conscious choice with the potential extra stress that may come with it, because they're probably because they would be trying to do it perfectly, I'm assuming?
Yes, that's such a great question. And I think, we both can speak to that. Mindfulness, and I talk to people about meditation, like, that's a daily practice for us, whether it's an hour, 3 hours, or 5 minutes. And people say, oh, meditate, I can't meditate because I can't do it right. I can't do it perfect. And you're right. There's like this Western sort of, we're right or wrong. It's like we're 100% on or we're 100% off. Because I think we're a very young, kind of immature civilization. You compare it to the Indian, Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, thousands and thousands of years. We've been around a few hundred years, right? We're babies in terms of our emotional capacity to grow and to not be perfect and to continue getting up and adopting the humility of beginner's mind, which I think we as Western countries, particularly Americans, could definitely use a little bit of. But what I say to people who are like, I can't meditate, I don't do it right. It's like, well, what comes up in meditation that feels like the wrong, the judgment, is exactly what you're detoxing. I mean, if taking Chinese herbs seasonally 4 times a year is what we do to, cleanse our inside of our bodies, meditation, to us is like cleansing our minds, our souls, right? It's like, so when you sit there, it's like when a detox, you start to feel worse before you start feeling better, right? And it's like, keep scrubbing, keep cleansing and keep allowing and building that capacity, no different than lifting weights, to confront yourself, to see the shadow parts of yourself that don't align with who you want to be, and then bring loving compassion to that. And then the grace to whatever your higher power is that gives you the ability to breathe and to exist without, I'm not pumping my blood right now. Like, who's doing it, right? There's this gracious energy that's all around us that's helping us along. We have to do our part and be willing to be on the journey. And what comes up is what needs to be let go. And giving yourself time and practice. It started with 5 minutes a day, and now I can meditate, hours in a day, so it's, but your thing, I want to say your stuff, it will come up, and that is a part of the practice. And if you're not okay with seeing the shadow side of yourself, then you're never going to grow spiritually. Your health is going to stagnate. Your relationships are going to stagnate. So it's, you're going to get the pain eventually. It's just a matter of when.
Well, I think, I think for me, it wasn't a matter of weighing the benefits. It was a matter of pain. Pain. I love pain now. I say the words, right? There's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. But pain is the greatest motivator. My life, I was in pain. And it was the pain of feeling like, what am I doing here? Is this all that there is, that motivated me 20 plus years ago to listen to that Wayne Dyer 5-minute tape and sit there and try to meditate. One of the great analogies that I've heard about meditation is that, your mind is like a glass of water with a lot of sand in it, and it's all cloudy. And when you start to meditate, that sand begins to drop to the bottom. But what happens is, when you're observing your mind, you begin to see the singular granules that before were just sort of blended into the mass of cloudiness. You begin to see them, and it's like, oh my God, look at that granule, and it's so big and it's so ugly, and I can't stand seeing that one granule. if you simply allow yourself to continue to look at that granule, eventually that granule will be at the bottom and you will feel different.
I want to push back just a little bit because none of us, I don't think, have children. Do you have children?
No,
But I think
Not just living.
not just living's our baby.
some people, you know, I was very much wanted to have space for myself, but a lot of people set up their lives so they'd have very little space for themselves. And they have so much responsibility that they can't shirk. And that it's incredibly difficult for them to find a lot of time for themselves. So I just want us to be conscious of that, because we could come off as very unfeeling about people's situation. Like I think of the time I have to work out or to meditate, to spend time with my husband. And I realized a lot of people, and I thought about it when I was young and made sure that my life was set up like that, because it was a priority for me to be able to volunteer and have time for that. Most people aren't able to do that. So I just feel like we have to be careful here, don't you? I mean, otherwise we're going to come off as just.
Well, I think too, I want to add to that. When we see that take place, I have a dear friend who's in that space, and Michael, we're just talking about pain and joy. And the only way we really know what real joy is because of the pain. And so because her life is set up so rigidly with big job, 3 kids, the house, all the stuff, I have learned from her that she only has so much space right now for that. And so she puts emotions and situations and pain and joy in kind of boxes and files them because that is her survival. So then you kind of, it's kind of this like very steady, not a lot of pain maybe, but not a lot of joy, because she's not allowing those ups and downs to kind of come in, because she can only handle so much.
Right.
And it's true that making a switch, like taking plant-based foods and meat out, that doesn't take time. In the beginning, it does take some thought and effort, but in terms of meditation and experimenting with a lot of different modalities, I mean, we're here to inspire people to choose. And I think people will be very interested in the discussion about detox and spirituality. Did you have any thoughts on that? Because I'm sure people talk to you about that. You have a show, Conscious Living. People probably say, hey, I don't have time to be super conscious.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, no, I think what you bring up, Alexander, is such a great argument that we hear a lot, that it's like, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time. It's like, you have time to watch TV. You have time to, go to the grocery store. You have time to gossip about whoever you're gossiping about. It's like, if you actually like documented every minute of the day that you're awake, you would be shocked how much time you have. And part of it is, again, I'm back to the standards and ideals of Western culture. It's like, has to be 100% or nothing, where we think, well, I have to have a lot of time to be able to sit and meditate. I said a couple minutes. Everybody's got a couple minutes a day. Everybody has 5 minutes. I've even sometimes during the day, listen, I work 2 jobs, 3. I'm also a yoga teacher, right? I've got 3 jobs. I am super busy and I still make time, even just a couple minutes, to meditate. And I'm not saying that you have to do that, but we have time for things that we want to prioritize if we think they're priorities. And trust me, I didn't think meditating for 30 minutes a day was a priority until I began meditating for 2 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Right? They say that's like, if you have time, meditate for short periods, but if you're super busy, meditate for an hour, right? Because it's the consciousness that we have. And this is really what we need to address. I'm so glad you brought this up, Alexander. It's our consciousness, which is a lack consciousness, a limitation consciousness of what we don't have. We don't have enough time. We live in a scarcity culture. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough this. We don't have enough that. We're not asking for hours. It's like a couple minutes a day, of just sitting in stillness. Whatever you want to call that, meditation, journaling, time with God, time in nature, can have like abundant returns in terms of my level of patience with others, my level of compassion for myself, my ability to focus on my work and the 3 jobs that I do have, right? So it's like, I'm as busy as anybody else. It's like, come work, spend a day in my shoes, and you'll see how busy I am. And I try not to complain about it, because I'm blessed to have created the life I want to create. I take responsibility for that. But, happiness is something that does require a certain amount of accountability. And I think we live in a culture of just instant gratification where we want what we want, but we don't want to have to give up anything. And that is why Western cultural Americans were the highest number of depression, antidepressant medications. It's like, yet we have the most abundant material wealth, but like psychologically and emotionally,
Yeah, and it is priority. I can see what you're saying is that there's a lot of things that we do because we feel like we have to do them. I have to do this because otherwise I'm not a good mother, husband,
Right.
sibling, whatever person. But maybe we don't. So
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and it means
And-
we have to let go of some things sometimes, which is hard because society tells us who we need to
Absolutely.
be and what we need to do and how we have to spend every day. Right. And look how happy that's gotten us. So maybe it's try something different. No judgment. This is just what works for us. It may not work for other people. And if it doesn't work for you, don't do it. But we're just, I think what we're stand for is just being open to experimenting and just see, is there something that you could give up? Is there a way that you could get up at, a little bit early every morning and maybe watch a little bit fewer Netflix? I've had to do that so I can get up in the morning and meditate, or do yoga or go grocery shopping, prepare that healthy plant-based, recipe that I want to try.
Instead of, going and having to have your music and your perfect music as you go and you do your run at the, at the gym, you could wake up and take 5 minutes and walk around the block in silence. And you could be mindful of that. And so I think, for us, our approach is that we are unconscious in so many instances. We have failed so many times, and on a daily basis, I'm appalled at how unconscious I am. I am. And yet, and still inside of the reality of life, and that everybody's busy and that everybody has the things that they have going on, I also know that there's people that have 5 kids who have busy corporate jobs that meditate more than I do on a daily basis, and somehow make their life, at least from my perception, that's one of the dangers, is comparing our insides with other people's outsides. But from my perception, have it more together than I do, even though they have more kids and more responsibilities. And so I think, that's part of the journey forward, is realizing, I love the name of your podcast, Switch for Good. What good are you seeking to bring forth in your life? But you will have to make a choice. But that choice doesn't have to be, it can be, instead of using real chicken, using, some slamming, beyond meat in that stir fry.
Yeah.
Or instead of scrolling Instagram for 5 minutes, turn your phone off and be mindful for 5.
If we don't invest in our peace of mind and well-being, then what is the point? If we're moving through life, doing all the things everyone expects us to do, but we're not happy, it's like we're giving up so much, and it is an investment, one way or the other. So these are not easy choices to make. It's not easy to make a switch.
Part of the problem in the Western culture is that our entire measurement of success is productivity. And it's killing us.
Yes.
It is heart disease, the highest rates of type 2 diabetes and highest rates of cancers. And it's just push, which that's not the measurement of success in a lot of Eastern cultures. So speaking of disease, Michael, I'm really interested to go into your documentary, The Cure, and first of all, why you feel the standard of care for breast cancer is completely outdated.
Well, I mean, there's a couple reasons. Number one is, you just look at the science. In 30 years and the tens or hundreds of billions of dollars that have been spent on research and science and all of these cures, we've improved our outcomes by 2 months. 2 months in 30 years. There are drugs that are being advocated for cancer curing that are 30-year-old drugs. And so inside of that, if we allow ourselves, and this is a big piece of mindfulness, can we just sit with what we're seeing? And it's easier to say than to actually do. But if we sat in that and we said, in what universe as Americans is that acceptable?
do you feel that our drugs are outdated and you need us to get new drugs? Or are you feeling like testing, the mammogram, the yearly mammograms are giving us false positives they skew the numbers because we're starting to find things earlier and earlier. So things that might never have become cancer are getting considered cured because they don't go anywhere. And so that's another reason why breast cancer rates look so good, is because we're finding stuff so early that might never have developed into anything.
Exactly. And you know, I promise you, if these were the outcomes that we were getting, and it was, for lack of a better term, penis cancer, and men had to get their penises cut off, I promise you it would not be acceptable in any universe.
We'd figure it out.
The fact that it's women in their breasts, I think is a whole other conversation.
So what do you advocate for breast care instead of yearly mammograms, and when someone does have breast cancer, the drugs that they give them?
Yeah, well, let me just chime in, since we produced the documentary together and I'm actually one of the subjects. What we did through the documentary, we're not advocating anything. All we're doing is taking a look at the current standard of care for breast cancer in our country and in the world. And what we found was, despite sort of being pushed, and this is my own experience with the breast cancer scare that kind of prompted the documentary, to being pushed to when, there were calcifications found in my breast in a standard mammogram, kind of being pushed to this standard of care, which is pharmaceuticals, cutting it out, biopsy, cut, until there's nothing left. And that's what my doctors were telling me. And there are two other women who had much scarier diagnoses. One was, basically almost the highest level of, I think, stage 4 breast cancer. And
double negative.
Double negative, yes. She had the breast cancer gene. And then another woman who was diagnosed with DCIS, which is ductal carcinoma in situ, which is kind of a more low grade breast cancer, which some even call stage zero breast cancer. And some say it's not even breast cancer at all because it hadn't fully developed. So we looked at 3 different stages, me being a very, very mild case, one being a mid-level, and then a third. And through women that we documented and, sort of got to see firsthand the different paths they chose to take and what those outcomes look like. So at no point in the documentary are we advocating that anybody do anything. All we're doing is showing that there is an alternative approach other than the mainstream standard of care that we're pushed to, that's getting us outcomes that are no different than, what we got 30 years ago. There's not an evolution happening. And, we looked at, everything from low dose chemotherapy as an option, oxygen therapy, adopting a plant-based diet, which all of them did, and many other modalities, energy work and healing and clearing sort of trapped emotions that manifest and can manifest into physiological diseases, as a journey that is a little bit different from, what mainstream medicine is telling us. And so for us, we leave it to the viewers. I hope you do watch the documentary to make their own assessment of, is that path right for them? And if so, to explore that. And if it isn't, we're not knocking the standard emergency care system. We all need emergency care, but there are other approaches.
And I think, one of the most enlightening interviews that we had was with one of the world's top breast surgeons, Dr. Laura Esserman out of UCSF. Yeah. And she talked specifically about DCIS, which Bianca mentioned, which essentially in many circles is called stage 0 cancer. It is actually not cancer.
Not even cancer.
But it's identified as stage 0 cancer. And Joanne, who was one of the people that participated, she was identified with that. And her doctor said, we're going to cut off both your breasts and we're going to give you, we're going to give you chemotherapy. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Esserman, this world-class breast surgeon, said, we don't have to do that anymore. That is actually not the most accurate way to go about treating this, because DCIS in 90+% of the cases will never become anything. And in 10% of the cases that it does, it's going to take 10 years.
Yeah, so it's too aggressive. We're too aggressive.
So the standard of care says cut it out and give her chemotherapy. But the reality is that you can actually take a more mindful approach and watch this and watch how it works. Mm-hmm. But guess what? How much money does the cancer industrial complex make for cutting off somebody's breasts and doing chemotherapy
And radiating.
tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, versus having somebody take a mammogram every 6 months or every year, watch it, and observe how things progress, and maybe even asking them, hey, maybe we should look at changing your diet and adding exercise to your lifestyle.
Yeah. The doctors get what, a couple months of nutrition training,
Not even a few days
in their entire course of being doctors, who we rely on. Thank God for doctors. Thank God for nurses. They are everything to keep us alive and well, particularly in these times. And there's some education information lacking. And we're just here to show, a different approach that certain people are considering. And, even just the diagnostic stage, instead of mammography, thermography is a much gentler, radiation-free way to track the breast health. And on a micro level, we show this in the documentary, you can see the subtle changes in the temperature of the breast way before it would manifest into anything even close to cancer. So these are the things that, our doctors aren't telling us, when we go to the hospitals. These are the things that our insurance isn't covering. And why, as Michael said, there's money in the medicine, there's money in disease. And until we shift that, and that's something, we don't even need to shift. For us, the whole purpose of our work and our platform is to shift consumer demand by educating the people about what we're not hearing on the mainstream news. We're not, hearing when we go to the doctors. There's another approach. And with consumer empowerment, you can decide for yourself. Like, we've had to become our own doctors and to learn things that, many doctors don't know, to stay healthy. And, I'm not going to go into my standard, doctor's office and have that conversation with him, because every time it's an argument, I know more than he does about my body, and as I should. But it does require a certain level of responsibility and education, which we as consumers would rather just go to the doctor and say, do it for me, give me the prescription, and I don't have to think. And that's what my parents did for 40 years, and many other people, that led them to the hospital and very, very painful deaths that could have been, prevented by simple lifestyle tweaks. I think this whole conversation is really a conversation about responsibility. How much responsibility are we willing to take for our mental well-being, for our physical well-being, for the well-being of the planet and the well-being of animals? Yet we are being asked, the vibration of the planet is rising, and whether we like that responsibility or not, we are being asked to make a more mindful choice, because the direction we're heading now, we see what's happening with, global warming. We see what's happening with the inhumane treatment of animals, and more important, the inhumane treatment of human beings, who are getting sicker and sicker and sicker and wondering why. So, our job is to really ask the question, is there a better way? Can we do better?
Yeah. Well, I will watch the film, because I myself, Dr. Greger has written a lot about mammogram, and what I found, and so I'm interested in this subject. What I found is that I feel pressured to have a yearly mammogram, and because my breasts are dense, they then send me to get an MRI or something more.
Yep.
And I feel like, here's the reason I do it, because if I get cancer, I don't want to feel like it was my fault.
Right.
And so anyway,
Exactly.
I don't want to go, because he also talks about, like you mentioned, the radiation problems. How many women, certain percentage, a very small percentage, will get some cancer from the radiation of the early mammograms and etc. So it's a tough.
It's a personal choice.
It is. And it's a little, he lost me on that. I think this, Alexander, because, a non-practicing doctor, as a Dr. Greger, doesn't take into the consideration all of the different hormone therapies that multitudes of women are on that greatly increase their breast cancer risk.
Yes.
So I'm on Depo-Provera, increases my breast cancer risk,
Right.
decreases my ovarian cancer risk.
Right.
But to tell women that they may not need to get annual mammograms, that I was done there, because this could be very dangerous. But I am happy to report that I did have a scenario where it was stage 0 breast cancer, and they didn't want to cut or do anything. They said, we just want to watch this closely.
Right.
They didn't ask about lifestyle. So, I was left to go home and continue to do that myself. But I guess 50% of that report and that result was positive, in that they didn't want to go in.
Yeah. And it's hard not to, just to pick up what you said. I mean, I was faced with the same thing, and ignoring the doctors is like the hardest thing to do. I hear you too, Alexander. It's like, you want to do it because if you get breast cancer, you don't want to be like, oh, I could have just gotten a mammogram and just done what they told me and lived. right? It's a really scary moment when you think, well, I could be more accountable and be my own doctor, but like, what if I'm wrong? Right? That's a hard choice that we do not, by any means think that we are in a position to make for anyone else. That's something we all have to make for ourselves.
And as a white man, it's certainly not in my place to advocate for anybody to do anything. My job, I feel, and was in the film that you can watch on PBS and Amazon Prime, is that my job was to look and say, let's look at mammograms and let's see that 80% of all breast cancers happen in the lymphs. And yet the mammograms are not able to identify 80% of all cancers that happen in the lymphs. It's an ineffective tool to be able to do that.
But thermograms do.
But thermograms do. So inside, or they begin that process. So inside of that, beginning to question the system, beginning to share light on these tools and these mechanisms that not only are ineffective, but it's $1 billion industry. So if we, that's part of our job as journalists, is to say, let's look at this and let's see, are we letting somebody down? Are we accepting a standard of care? Are we making unacceptable behavior acceptable? And I think we are, without question, inside of it. There has to be a better way because we deserve better.
Great. I want to move on to another area.
Hot topic.
Physical health.
I know. I have one more question because I want to help somebody that may be listening.
Yeah.
A friend diagnosed yesterday with lobular cancer, so milk duct cancer, the way I understand it. And you guys probably run into this all the time. Somebody who is probably maybe not as into, say, diet, lifestyle, energy work, certain modalities that we're speaking about today.
Yes.
And so it may just be a good idea to leave them alone because they didn't ask me. So that might be your answer. But if somebody's not asking, but your heart just ripped in half because you know that maybe there's something that could potentially just give her body more to fight. Let's just even say that, because that's what she's ready for. She's ready for a fight.
Good.
What's the inroad conversation that you have that's kind and non-threatening? And
Yes. If all you can do, if there's a space, it's like, hey, I've done some research, I've watched some films, and I'd love to make some recommendations to you if you're open to receiving them. Mm-hmm. And if she's like, I'd be willing to consider that, then you can send the links and et cetera, and then leave it there. And I'm speaking from experience, right? If a person, you bring a horse to water, right? And we sometimes want it more for people than they want it for themselves. And yet we're all individual souls that came here for our own lessons, and we have to have enough respect for others to give them the dignity of their own journey. And that may mean, a deathly, disease, right? And it may mean unhappiness. That may mean eating meat and feeling the vibration of anger and sorrow every time you take a bite, right? I have to give other human beings the dignity of their experience the same way I want them to give me the dignity of being vegan and meditating and yoga and being on the journey that I'm on, and if she says, no, I'm not interested, the work, the spiritual, muscle is to kindly, graciously say, okay, I'm here if you do, and leave it there. It's hard though, because we care.
Helpful answer. Yeah, very much.
Have your links ready to send that email if she does say yes, though. Have your research ready to go.
It's ready. It's been ready.
Bianca, you're very interested in fashion. You have a passion for sustainable fashion.
Yes.
We have had a segment, two people on who talked about the problems with the fashion industry. But for our listeners who might not have heard that, and for your take on it, I'd be very interested. Tell us how fashion is damaging the environment. If you could maybe just give us some 1, 2, 3, these are the reasons why, so people will, and give them an idea too of how we can approach it if we love fashion and want to be good to the planet.
Yeah. Well, fashion is such a has a huge impact on the planet, not just like how we dress and how we feel and express ourselves, but you think about the tons and tons of water and toxic dyes that are, leached out into our rivers, lakes, and streams every day, poisoning, polluting, the water that we drink and the water that, the animals live in, and the fish and the oceans and that sort of thing. I mean, to not be more interested, at least, in finding out more sustainable ways of production, I think for us would keep us being part of the problem and not part of the solution. So there's, the eco-fashion movement covers many things, looking at the materials that the garment is made from. For example, is the garment made sustainably using, non-toxic dyes, using minimal water, reusing, the resources and the materials again and again and again, and zero waste is also a technology, to looking at the types of materials, and are they, made in sustainable ways. So for example, organic cotton, where that cotton is going to be free of pesticides, it's going to be free of fungicides and all the things that, again, pollute our waters, rivers, streams, and the food we eat. We want to eat organic food. Well, do you want to put threads next to your body that are made from toxic chemicals that, are going into the largest, most absorbent organ in our bodies, which is our skin? So thinking about that, I try to buy organic materials and organic cotton, things from cotton and organic cotton whenever possible, just for that purpose. And then thirdly, thinking about how that garment was made. So, the fair trade movement looks at, are the people who make your clothes, who manufacture your clothes, being paid a fair living wage? Or are they holed up in sweatshop factories, right? For pennies a day, dollars a day, and they're mostly women and women of color, in places like Bangladesh and India and China, who are, being treated very inhumanely so that we can buy a t-shirt for $5, and taking a look at what the true cost of fashion is, not just to the planet and to our own health, but to, the health and well-being of other human beings. So there's a lot of different touch points that you can, as a more mindful consumer, buying eco-fashion made from sustainable materials like organic cotton and tencel and hemp, which is one of the most sustainable, renewable materials that uses very little water and is just easy to harvest, to wearing thrifted fashion. That's something that we love to do. Probably 90% of the clothes in my closet, other than organic and, tencel, bamboo, et cetera, are thrifted. So instead of having to create a brand new garment using all the water and all the labor and all the toxic dyes, why not go to Goodwill or Salvation Army or Crossroads or any of the other sort of, clothing trading companies to buy?
I also want to recommend ThreadUp online.
ThreadUp is a great one. There's lots of.
I'm sure you have some other online ones too.
Oh yeah. There's tons of them. I mean, there's tons of ways to repurpose, and it's a great way to go and just clean out your closet quarterly when you're doing your cleanse, right? When you're doing your detox, it's like go and like those clothes you haven't worn in a while, clean them out, and then go to Goodwill and you can replace them without there being this massive, footprint on the planet. Because, we're throwing out tons and tons and tons of clothing every year. And where's that going? Into our landfills. We're running out of landfill space, polluting the planet, not only in how we manufacture the clothes, but the clothes that we dump, when we continue to buy fast fashion. And so, I try to avoid all the fast fashion, big box stores wherever possible. Go to Goodwill and, support locally made, organically made, sustainable designers. And there's plenty of them out there now. I mean, 10 years ago, you couldn't find them, but there's lots of great options. Even at H&M, which is one of the big box polluters, they have a whole line that's called the Conscious Collection, made from organic cotton and repurposed materials, right? So it's much, much easier to find, but just thinking a little bit differently about what you're putting on your body as well as in your body, could make a big difference.
And then you had a show called about upcycling clothes, and I didn't know I had to look up that word. So explain to our audience and to Dotsie and me what upcycling is, and because it's a great idea. It's a great way.
Yeah. Well, instead of throwing, these garments, once you're done with them or tired of wearing them, or they're out of fashion into the landfill, taking them and sewing them into a new pattern, a new garment, a new design. And there's lots of designers that specialize in that. Reformation is one of them. They take old garments and they've got chains. They're a huge brand all over in the US. And,
Eileen Fisher.
And Eileen Fisher is one that repurposes. And you can actually, if you purchase Eileen Fisher, you can return your old clothes once you're tired of them, and you get a discount on the next look that you want. But we have on this season on PBS, we did a wonderful couture fashion show that's made 100% from upcycled materials. And these designers are just so talented, like what they can do with what other people would consider scraps. what other people consider garbage, they've literally turned into some of the most beautiful designs you could possibly imagine. And so that's another movement where if you don't want to go to the thrift shop and like buy something that someone else has worn in the form that they wore it, support an upcycle designer. There's many on Etsy as well, that take pieces of things and turn them into, brand new creations. So there's lots of fun options.
Great. I think that will inspire a lot of people to stay fashionable without keeping, buying something new every season.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with fashion as I fell in love with her. And, there's something really empowering about being able to, we buy used houses, we buy used cars, right? But yet for some reason we're like, oh, I don't want to wear somebody else's clothes. And it's like, dude, what is the dry cleaner for? Like, buy them. And even people that buy fast fashion, it's like, oh, I can get a t-shirt for $20. And it's like, yeah, you could get 5 for $20 at Goodwill. And you could take them to, spend $5 to get them dry cleaned, and then you have a whole new wardrobe. But now you're sort of opting out of this incredibly destructive cycle of creating new clothes that you're only going to wear for a few days or a few wears, and then they're going to go into the landfill. And that's something that I find is incredibly empowering. And also I get really fresh stuff. So like I bought a 1963 vintage jacket just a couple weeks ago. And it's like, it's better made than the jackets that were made in, this year.
Yeah.
And it's fresh and nobody else is going to be wearing it. So, that's one of the fun parts about, sort of being on this journey.
It's great. It's great.
What are you two most excited about coming up?
Oh my gosh, just having a bit of a vacation and breathing for a couple of weeks.
Right.
But we've got some fun shoots actually on the horizon. We're looking at going to the Caribbean this summer, possibly Africa. We both got our DNA done, sort of our DNA tests a couple
That's
years
fun.
ago, and tracing our roots back, me to Africa, the Philippines, and Wales, as I discovered. I'm like 12% Welsh or something. And
Wow.
going back to Ireland and Scotland, and documenting that journey of like coming home to places we've never been before, and doing that as mindfully and consciously as we can. But there's a lot of other content in the can that's coming. We've got a wonderful story about conservation of elephants in Thailand, the woman who's rescuing elephants and taking care of them, making sure that nobody rides them, which I didn't know that riding them, implies that basically they have to be brutalized in order to be, sort of broken to allow a human being to ride an elephant's back, so I'll never do that again.
Which we did on our honeymoon
in
Thailand.
Our first time going to Thailand, right? The second time we documented a story about people who are rescuing elephants who've been through that. So, trying to clean up our karma, right? Which is really what conscious living is all about. And just so many fun things on the horizon that we're excited to both share and to continue filming for our next season. Yeah.
And for foodies, where we eat our way through Vietnam, which to me has the best food in the world. And, with Happy Cow, the Happy Cow app, and sort of having conversations with people, we eat our way through Vietnam, and it is some of the most amazing, incredible food, that from texture to taste to, it was just really remarkable. So there's a lot of great food. Singapore is a great food culture. So we have a lot of really great, some of the best cheese I've ever had in my life. And I was a cheesehead. Like my mom gave me melted brie as a child instead of breast milk.
But it made you dumb, so you changed.
Right. Yes. Thank you. It still makes, that's another conversation.
We're still cleaning that up. So.
Right. Yes. We're still working through that dumbness. But we had the most amazing cheese, brie and camembert in Paris.
Vegan.
That'll be in this upcoming season that's on, the Create Network and Amazon and PBS. Made out of aquafaba, which is basically the water that's left over when you cook beans.
Fermented, just like
unbelievable.
That's great.
There's so many great people doing wonderful things.
So people can catch your show Conscious Living on PBS. You also have a 10-day detox if they were interested in our detox conversation on the Conscious Living site, which is it Conscious Living?
TV.com. ConsciousLivingTV.com, or you can follow us at Conscious Living TV on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook.
And the book you can get on Amazon as well.
Conscious Living 10-day detox.
Great. Thank you so much for being on.
So fun. Yeah. You guys have, I love that you're going to go follow your DNA. I think you guys had a similar experience to my husband and I. Bianca, my husband is dark and delicious like you are. And he got his DNA and it came back and it was like Philippines and Scandinavian and Pacific Islander. And I was like, that is so cool. And then Michael, I'm like, I'm going to do it. Mine came back and it was like 99% British, go to Scotland. And that's the only place you have to go.
Yeah, right.
So I was like, okay, let's go to all your places because that's so much more interesting.
It keeps the
I
journey
love
going.
that you're going to do that. Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be able to get on a plane and, keep the journey going the way things are happening. I think hopefully by this summer we will. So.
Great. Well,
Have
thank
the
you
best
so much
time.
for being on the show.
Thank you
Yes,
so much
thank
for
you.
having this. What a great, exciting, impassioned conversation.
Yes.
I love it.
It
Really
was so
fun.
fun. Hey, folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switchforgood.org. That's podcast@switchforgood.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.